In this video, we're going to focus on adding detail to our airbag by creating the Ferrari logo in the center. To start this off, I want to trim away a section where the logo is going to be. Now, when we created our sketch picture, we created a 60mm circle at the origin that represented the Ferrari logo. If we show our sketch picture, you can see that circle completely encompasses the logo. If we use this sketch to trim our surface, we're actually going to be removing it from the folder we created and undoing some of our organization. So instead, I want to create a new sketch on our front plane, simply select the sketch picture and use Convert Entities. That'll bring that circle into our current sketch and allow us to use it to trim our surface, but not remove it from our reference image folder. This is important to note that we can still alter that 60mm at any time, which will affect both the original sketch picture sketch and our new trim, but it won't affect the location or the size of our image. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to 60, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that using any of these previous sketches is going to alter the organization. If this sketch was used in an original feature, that would have a different implication because it would have an original parent-child relationship farther up the tree, and reorganizing it wouldn't allow that relation to rebuild. But in our case, the sketch picture holds no relation to anything else in our current part, so it's important to leave those relationships intact. Now that we've removed some material here, I'm going to go ahead and start a sketch on our right plane, simply grab this edge, use my Convert Entities, and that brings a line representing the size of this cut into my current sketch. That allows me to turn this into a construction line by using For Construction, and this gives me a nice reference to start a revolve feature. Simply for reference, I'm going to start a construction line at the origin and drag it out in space to make sure that it's horizontal. I'm going to use another construction line that's vertical. This will allow me to add a 3-point arc starting at that point out in space and apply a tangent relation. The tangent relation is important because once we revolve this arc, we don't want to have a point in the center of our logo. We want to make sure that our decal is nice and smooth. We want to drag this part in an orientation that allows us to have the logo above our surface of our airbag, but we don't want to completely overshadow it. Once you get it into a rough location, we're going to add a dimension. I'm going to give this 44mm. I want to drag the end point of my arc out, and anytime that you have this issue where it's actually snapping to other geometry, if you hold down the Control key, it will override any snap relation settings that you have in SolidWorks. So I'm holding down the Control key, get this close to where I want it, then apply a dimension to it. We're going to go from our center line, we're going to go out 27.5mm. From here, I'm going to create another 3-point arc and simply give this a dimension of 2mm radius. Now we can finish off our sketch by drawing a horizontal line and lines back to our horizontal construction line, creating a complete solid revolve. If you want to do this as a surface, that's fine as well. You don't need to add these last couple lines, and then we can simply knit this back to our original surface. We'll go ahead and proceed with this as a surface, just to knit everything together into one solid. It's important that you fully define your sketches, especially when you're dealing with geometry that might change later. For instance, we define this based on the location of the origin. If we went back and changed the surface at all, this location wouldn't change, but the geometry might be affected. So it's important that you fully define your geometry based on how things might change. In this case, I don't plan on changing anything, so I'm simply going to use the Display Relation dropdown, fully define sketch, and allow SolidWorks to calculate remaining dimensions needed to fully define my sketch. In this case, it needed a radius for our 3-point arc, and that gave us the endpoint location for our second 3-point arc, which was already defined by a radius, and its endpoint is fixed based on the construction geometry we brought in from our trim. We can exit our sketch now. From our Surface tab, we can use a revolved surface, selecting our axis of revolution, and you can instantly notice that we have an issue. Once we OK this, we have a gap between our surfaces here. This is one of the benefits of doing this as a solid revolve. because we don't have to deal with the gaps that we're creating in this surface. Another thing we can do is note that it's actually attached or coincident with the upper edge, but the bottom edge it's not. So we can use our right surface, we can trim our new revolve, and we can create a boundary surface going from this edge to this edge. Click OK, and we're going to knit everything together. Now once we mirror everything across our right plane, use mirror this body, we can knit surfaces. Now we have a single revolved surface decal in the center that's knitted to everything else, and it's making a nice sealed surface for us. If we want to turn this part into a solid, we simply need to fill in this back section. We're going to go ahead and hide our solid part. Use a filled surface. I'm going to right click on one of these open edges, select open loop, and that's going to create a filled surface at the bottom. Now there is an issue here. You can merge results, but one thing I like to do is simply hit OK, knit after the fact, and try to form a solid. There are a few ways that you can do this in SolidWorks, but I find that doing my knit surface after the fact as a new feature sometimes gives me more flexibility in creating my geometry. Once we OK that, we can take a look at a split, drag this up, and notice that we actually have a solid part. Now we can treat this as a solid geometry part, or we can go back to a surface at any time. The next thing we need to do is actually add the decal to the front of our steering wheel, but I think that's better saved for another video. That concludes creating the center logo on our steering wheel.